Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Well, this morning we are beginning a new series on Jesus' teachings that will take us June and July through the summer. These are the lessons that Jesus taught when he gathered his disciples together along the Sea of Galilee up on a hillside. And the scriptures that we'll be studying over the next 6 weeks will be, they are, as we know it, the Sermon on the Mount. And today's scripture is just the beginning portion that we know as the Beatitudes. Jesus had called together those first disciples, and while they were traveling through the Galilee, teaching and healing, he was becoming quite popular. More and more people knew of him and heard of him and were gathering around as his fame spread. And chapter 5 of the book of Matthew says that when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain and he sat down with his disciples, and his disciples came to him, and then he began to speak and taught them. So we imagine we're on a hillside. Don't imagine I'm Jesus, that would be frightening. But imagine that I'm sharing with you Jesus' words. Because these lessons are the essence of Christ's teachings. And I'm excited to go through each of them with you this morning. Now, beatitude, if you didn't know, means a state of bliss. And it is used for the title of this section of Jesus' sermon. It's those words or scriptures that start with blessed are. Cameron read them beautifully. So blessed are those who are poor in spirit, who mourn, who are meek, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who are merciful, pure in heart. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers and those who are persecuted. Now, I don't know about you all, but that doesn't really sound like a list of things that I would want to be a part of necessarily. Do I really wish to be poor in spirit and meek and hungry and thirsty for righteousness? I'm not sure I'm up for the job. So there must be more to this lesson than what we see on the surface. It's hard to understand how this list of seemingly downtrodden and pessimistic characteristics might somehow be our path to blessedness. I think it's time that we dig in. Anyone else ready? Yeah. Well, the very word blessed is a special word. It describes the joy which is serene and untouchable. It's self-contained. It's within us. It is that joy which is completely independent of chance and changes of life. Have you experienced that joy before? The English word happiness gives its own case away. It contains the root hap, which means chance. So it's not happiness we're looking for. Happenstance, it may or may not, I may or may not find joy, but it is that joy that is deep within. Human happiness is something which is dependent on the chances and changes of life, something that life may give, but which also life may destroy. And the Christian blessedness is completely untouchable, unassailable. No one, says Jesus, will take your joy from you. And the Beatitudes speak of that joy which seeks us through our pain, that joy which sorrow and loss, pain and grief are powerless to touch. That joy which shines through the tears and which nothing in life or death can take away. It is the joy that comes from knowing Jesus, really knowing him deep down in our soul. Verse 3, our first beatitude reads, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Well, I think we should start with what in the world does poor in spirit mean? sound like something I might like to be, but Jesus isn't talking about someone who's just poor, someone on the lower rung of the socioeconomic scale. The idea that Jesus is expressing is that someone described as poor in spirit is someone who has no influence. They are humble and helpless. Someone who is downtrodden and oppressed by the world, and the only resource they have, the only resource they need, is that they have put their full trust in God. And I would argue that if we put our whole trust in God, we are hardly poor in spirit. Another way to say it is, blessed is the person who has realized their own utter helplessness and has put their whole trust in God. As a result, then we become detached from things, right? Things that have not brought us happiness to begin with. And in turn, we become completely reliant on God, because we know that God alone can bring the help, the hope, and the strength that we need. People who are poor in spirit are those who have realized that things mean nothing, and God means everything. Verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This seems quite straightforward, and it is. Those who are experiencing grief can be assured that God will bring them comfort. Sorrow can do two things for us. It can show us, as nothing else can, the essential kindness of our friends and neighbors, and it can show us, as nothing else can, the comfort and compassion of God. Many people in the midst of grief have discovered God as they never have before. You see, when things are going well, it's possible for us to live for years and years on the surface of things. But when sorrow comes, we are driven to the deep things of life. And if we accept it, a new strength and beauty will enter our soul. Through Jesus Christ, we find comfort. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, when we hear this, we may think that to be a benefactor of the whole earth, we have to become a doormat, right? Someone who is spineless and subservient. Meek just somehow conjures up those images, but meek doesn't mean that at all. It is meant to describe that middle ground between excessive anger and complete passivity. It's the happy medium which describes someone who is angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time. Meekness means humility, the acceptance of the necessity to learn and to be forgiven. It describes our proper attitude toward God. Blessed is the person who has the humility to know their own ignorance, their own weakness, their own need. And it is in this meekness that Jesus says, we will inherit the earth. Verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, the hunger and thirst that is suggested here is the hunger of someone who is starving for food. And the thirst is a thirst of someone who will die if they don't receive drink. Now, this is an experience probably most of us have never felt. This isn't the G church is over, I'm hungry for lunch. No. This is that intense hunger. And the question then becomes, how much do you want goodness or righteousness? Do you want it as much as the starving person wants food? Or the person who is dying of thirst? Do you want it as much as they want and need water? How intense is our desire for goodness or righteousness? Now, most of us, I would say, want and desire goodness. But how many of us get distracted when it becomes even a little bit difficult? We have to be prepared to make real sacrifices for our faith and seek righteousness above all else. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful. They will receive mercy. Now, we've learned many times through the New Testament that to be forgiven, we must forgive, right? The Lord's Prayer guides us through that. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Being merciful is the ability to get inside someone else's skin, to fully understand their point of view, to understand how they think and feel. It's a deliberate identification with their situation, their sympathy, going through or understanding what they're going through. The merciful are those who can offer the other person what they need, not what we want to give. Jesus demonstrates this for us by simply being born into a human body. He literally got inside the skin of what it means to be human. And our first step to receiving mercy is to be merciful first toward others. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. I always think of little children, the pure in heart, right? The pure in heart is someone whose motives are pure, not those who seek credit for something they've done. God bless you. This beatitude demands from us the most exacting self-examination. Is our work done from motives of service to others or motives of pay? Is our service given from selfless motives or the motives of self-display? Look, everyone will see me doing what I'm doing. Is the work we do in church done for Christ or our own prestige? We must examine our own hearts to determine what our motives are and to work to align them to God so that we may see God. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Now in the Bible, peace means not only freedom from all trouble, it means the enjoyment of all that's good. And this blessing of the peacemakers is not also directed to those who love peace. There's many who love peace, but who aren't willing to do the action required. It is those who take action that are blessed and who are called children of God. We must avoid evading the difficult situations, but instead face them and deal with them and ultimately conquer them. Once peace comes through struggle, peace comes through struggle, and it is the struggle that defines us or redefines us. To say it another way, blessed are those who make this world a better place for everyone to live in, not just ourselves. Verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And verse 11 goes together. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Jesus let it be known that as his disciples, it may require, or probably it will require, his followers to be persecuted. Jesus did not come to this earth to make our life easy, but to make us great in God's eyes. Our ancient sisters and brothers saw this as the ultimate opportunity to show their loyalty to Christ when they would be called upon to suffer persecution. Sometimes persecution comes in the act of vandalism, words written on a sign. And today, you and I must be prepared to endure false accusations, negative attitudes, or name-calling, because we have taken a stand for Christ. You see, we are blessed when we stand up for what we know is right and those things that God has called us to endure. Through Christ's teachings, we learn what it means to be vulnerable to God and to others. The joy comes when we become less focused on ourselves and more focused on Christ and those around us who are in need. as we are growing in grace to perfection, as our dear John Wesley teaches us, we are becoming Christ's disciples. We are claiming our full personhood. And one day at a time, we choose to be a blessing, following Christ and daring to be like him. And it is then that we all will be called blessed. Amen.